What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the Sweat Local podcast. We're also recording this, so if you're watching this on YouTube, what's going on? I was just telling Will, we've been doing a lot of these like TikTok videos and Instagram Reel videos where like we cut in and out for like 5-second segments. So like, man, we're going to actually be, somewhat live talking for quite a while today. But if you are listening to this and you don't see what's behind us, we have a big whiteboard with a bunch of scribbly things that Will apparently says are words and has some meaning behind. So he's going to explain to us what this craziness means.
Yeah, so kind of the topic today is mobility, and we're going to use two ways of thinking about mobility today, and if what you're doing is improving your mobility or is it effective, and why you should be always searching for better mobility. So on the left here, we got a contrast of cold mobility and warm mobility. And I like to give this example to people to kind of point out how their body's functioning on a day-to-day basis. So let's use an example. Example one is Isaac comes to the gym on a given day. And he comes in, he does no warm-up, and he just starts to barbell squat or overhead press or whatever. He just goes into it. His capacity to do those things is cold mobility. He's done no warm-up. It's just what is his body capable of doing like at any given time. The truest test of cold mobility is like wake up, get out of bed. What can you do? Can you touch your toes? Can you sit in a squat? If your body is like really rusty and creaky, your cold mobility isn't very good. The opposite is warm mobility, which is Isaac comes back to the gym, same day, parallel universe. But before doing his barbell squat or overhead press, he does like 18 minutes of some banded stretches and pigeon and a bunch of things. And maybe now that he's warm, he can express more movement. Maybe he can squat deeper or squat better or whatever. His shoulder overhead range of motion is improved. So there's a difference there. We want as much cold mobility as possible, right? Because if I can do things here in the now, in the moment, that means my joints are ready to go. They have better capacity. I'll probably be less prone to injury. I hope you can understand that it's nicer to have more cold mobility versus needing to warm up all the time.
I have a question, and hopefully it doesn't take you too much off your train of thought, but just because you have cold mobility, does that mean that you should use it? So what I mean is like someone like yourself, who I'm sure has pretty decent cold mobility, because of that, when you come to the gym, does that mean that you can just toss on 135 onto the bar and start squatting immediately, or should you still technically warm up your body?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Both. If you have the ability to just go at it, that's like the purest form of like I would say a healthy human. Like when we think about kids running around, kids don't warm up and they just sprint right away and they have no issues. Now, obviously, we get older, things start to happen. We probably shouldn't go as ambitious as them, but there's something to that, which if you can do something right away, your body is clearly in a great condition. But it is always good advice to warm up, even if you don't need to. So I like to warm up because it's probably good for me to warm up and do some general preparatory movement, even though I might not need to.
Yeah, so like, you might, if your working sets for back squats are 225, it's not like you're going to go straight to 225, but maybe you go and do empty barbell squats and then whatever. Like it's not like you have to go on the spin bike or the rower for 40 minutes beforehand.
Yeah, I mean this is not like a fake example that we just made up. I actually had a squat workout yesterday, and I had a really busy day, and I didn't really have much time to work out. And I sat at the desk for a couple hours, and I literally went downstairs and I did 2 sets of squats before I started my working sets, and that was my warm up. And I didn't get injured. I'm fine. I squatted okay, like heavy wise. It wasn't my heaviest day. But I didn't need to do a lengthy warm-up because my ankles, my knees, my hips, they're good to go.
Yeah.
But normally I would like to warm up.
Yeah. Just so people know, everything we do when it's Will and I is all organic.
Yes.
As much as I would love to plan our content beforehand,
it's not that planned.
Will likes to just be free.
Yeah, free as a bird. So that's cold and warm mobility. Again, do warm-ups. Warm-ups are important. They're a good thing to do, but it makes sense. If you can have more cold mobility, that means you have a better functioning body. Okay, and also you don't want to rely, right? Like if I have to warm up always, or else I can't do a given movement, that's probably a problem, right? If I have to do my 80 banded stretches so I can front squat, clearly my body is not able to front squat and I'm forcing it to do that. Okay, other side. This is definitely not something I created. I can't take any credit for it. I don't think it's patented though, so I hope I don't get sued. But it's the idea of passive range of motion and active range of motion, and trying to close the gap between those two things. It's similar to the first idea we talked about, but it is different. So the outer black circle is what we would call your passive range of motion. This could be like someone else brings your arm overhead for you and you have 190 degrees of shoulder flexion. But then I ask you to, on your own, bring your arm overhead, which would be the inner circle. Maybe you can only bring your arm to 90 degrees, right? Or this would be like 130. The bigger the gap between your active range of motion and your passive range of motion, again, there's no guarantees. It's not like you're going to get hurt. It's not like you're a bad person. But I hope it can make sense to you. If you can only bring your shoulder to here, and then you're passively always using something else to get past the degrees that you can actually control, you're working in tissues, muscle, tendon, ligament, that don't have a lot of business being there. So there will be a higher chance of injury. Whereas if we can have a closer gap, it'll never be perfect. You'll always have more passive flexibility than active. But if you can have more active flexibility, active range of motion, similar to cold mobility, you're going to have a lot more strength in your range of motion. Your tissues are more prepared.
Earlier in the week, we were talking about flexibility versus mobility.
Yeah.
So that second picture, the one where the two circles are closer together, would that be an individual that is actually more mobile as opposed to this one? They might be flexible, but they're not so much mobile.
Yeah. In our definitions of mobility and flexibility, that's right.
Okay.
I mean, someone else might designate them differently. Yeah. But yeah, that's exactly right. So like, I'll give you another example. Most people understand a hamstring stretch when you're laying on your back and you loop like an elastic band, like a workout band around your foot. And then you, with your hands, you pull on that band to bring your leg up in the air to create a hamstring stretch. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely.
So that's a passive stretch. You're using this band to pull your straight leg up in the air and you create a stretch. But if I said, hey, take away the band, the passiveness, and bring up that leg on your own with a completely straight knee and don't compensate elsewhere in your body, maybe you can't get nearly as far. That means you actually don't have a lot of mobility, you just have flexibility because you can be brought with help. Someone who can bring their leg to that exact same position has mobility because they don't need the passive stretch to get there.
So it's safe to say, once again, that image where the two circles are closer together, that individual would most likely have a lot better cold mobility than that other individual.
Yeah, not necessarily, but probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I mean, I want to go more in depth about like how people can work on something like cold mobility and warm mobility. I don't know if that's something you want to drive on now or we save that for another podcast.
Move more and move better. Like, not just move more. It's not easy. It's not easy. Because move better is generally good, but it's not specific enough. Because like if someone just starts to move more, maybe they just start doing this. That's more movement, but that's not necessarily better movement to increase my shoulder mobility. But generally speaking, if you want more cold mobility, you need to be doing stretching work or mobility work that incorporates strength.
What would be like an example of you like using strength to stretch or be mobile or whatever? Like, do you just mean not having someone assist you in a stretch and having the strength to hold that position on your own? Or do you literally mean like banded work and stuff like that?
No, I'll show it for the people watching and then try and articulate it for the people listening. But I could do what's called a one-legged good morning, which is I'm going to take one foot off the floor and I'm going to hinge over and bend at my hips. I'd hinge over with a completely flat back, and then I'm going to pull myself out of the position. So I have strength in this range because I was able to hinge with control to a given range of motion. If I have more range of motion, I have more strength and flexibility. And I was able to bring myself out of position. So that's an example of a strength-based stretch.
Gotcha.
Versus, say, just kind of like a passive stretch with no strength. That would be just like bending over and just like reaching for my toes desperately and then just hanging out there for a period of time.
I know I've taken some things away. I've learned some stuff.
Cool.
Which is nice and fun. If you guys enjoyed this type of content, please let us know in the comments down below. Go ahead and, like this video if you're watching on YouTube. Rate us the 5 stars if you're listening to it on any sort of podcasting platform. With all that being said, Mr. William, thank you for taking time today. Really appreciate it. And for all of you guys, hope you have the best day ever. Bye for now.